Welcome into the Ostrom Avenue Podcast. Owen, Valentine, Ben, Shulman. Those of you with us on YouTube can see there's a mix-up, but those of you listening to us wherever you get your podcasts, we now welcome on a brand new member of the Ostrom Avenue Podcast family, Johnny Gadamowitz. He is the young gun. He is the heir to the podcast when I leave, and then a little further down the road when Ben leaves. So we welcome on Johnny. Johnny, throw some opening words out here, man. Welcome to the pod.
Well, guys, you know what? I can't thank you enough for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. The Ostrom Avenue pod has done great things over the past year plus, and I'm really just excited to see what direction we take this in, and just getting better each week and hoping to continue to bring some great content for all our listeners moving forward.
Well, no bigger week to join in for you. It is tournament time. Syracuse, they had us sweating, I will say. They 100% had me sweating yesterday, and there were some expletives coming from my Ackerman apartment because I thought that things were going extremely south. When I saw Wichita State in a play-in game, you see Utah State getting the bye, and you start mathing it out. You start looking at the teams that are still up in the air. And it was an oh no situation for me. I'm sure it was an oh no situation for a lot of people. And somehow they escape the last four in, they get a bye. And it just seems like, they're finally getting the tournament credit that sometimes in the past you wish they got, sometimes in the past they got and were able to make runs because of some fortunate breaks. What was the thought process for you guys yesterday? Because I know I was sweating a storm up, and for a little bit, I thought I had covered my my last Syracuse basketball game for a while here.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting day. If you're someone who covers Syracuse and therefore just out of wanting to cover the team longer, is rooting for the Orange to get into the tournament. I had similar feelings as you did. The first two regions go by, one of the play-in games goes by. Syracuse isn't in there. Utah State is, and Wichita State is. As you said, those are two teams that pretty consistently for the last week were ranked below SU. So that, starts to get the blood boiling a little bit. But I had always felt after Syracuse had made its late season run that the Orange were positioned better than Louisville. And that's kind of where I was resting my laurels there. And I guess the committee agreed with me. It's a tough for Louisville fans. If I was cheering for the Cardinals, I would not be happy that Utah State and Wichita State both made the tournament instead of Louisville. But for Syracuse, to somehow get past the byes when most bracketologists, just general college basketball analysts, thought that it would be a 2-win road to the NCAA tournament, and then the Orange get 1 win and a really good performance against Virginia. To get past not even the bye games now, or not even the playing games now to the byes, that's big for SU, regardless of the fact that it's a tough opponent, who we'll talk about later.
Yeah, and it certainly didn't make matters any easier, guys, and I'm sure you'll agree from a stress standpoint that the Big Ten championship right before was an overtime game. So, you're sitting watching that game thinking, all right, here we go, let's roll. It's time to finally find out what we've all been awaiting for the past couple of days. And sure enough, Illinois and Ohio State go into overtime to just prolong those nerves. And, as time goes on, you guys hit the nail on the head. You're not feeling great as you see Utah State, Wichita State both get spots. I feel for Louisville fans as well, Ben. And it's interesting because, you look at the Cardinals and they had that extended COVID pause at one point and wound up playing, I believe, significantly less games. And it's interesting to see, how the committee sort of factored that in, not to the fault of the Cardinals, obviously, but interesting to see the Cardinals get left out. And it just makes you wonder as a college hoops fan in a year like 2020 and 2021 that we've never seen before, how much, that the lack of games that they did wind up playing really hurt their chances in the long run. And it's interesting too, because, I was of the mindset that when Syracuse had those 3 games left in the regular season stretch, when you had Georgia Tech, UNC, and then they wound up adding the Clemson game, which of course was huge. I went into that stretch thinking, all right, you need 3 out of 3 here. And if that doesn't happen, I don't care what you do in the ACC tournament. You got to take advantage of these last 3 games. When they lose that game to Georgia Tech, I thought, no way. And then what happens? You wind up only winning 1 ACC tournament game, and you still find a way to sneak in. I don't know how Jim Boeheim does it, but kudos to Mr. Boeheim and the rest of the Orange squad for finding a way to sneak in.
It's pretty much opposite circumstances for Syracuse and Louisville. I remember I was doing a show leading up to the Georgia Tech game, and we sort of came to that same conclusion you were just talking about. You got to beat Georgia Tech. You got to beat UNC. You got to beat Clemson before you can even really start questioning what you have to do in the ACC tournament. You got to win all 3, or else, you're going to have to make a deep, deep run into the tournament there. And they lose, then they win, then they win. And all of a sudden, the narrative was just like, wait a minute, maybe they don't. And, you end up getting in with 1 tournament win. Louisville, on the other hand, I think everyone thought was in. You look at brackets going into the ACC tournament, everyone sort of just sees the Cardinals as a shoo-in for the tournament. And then they lose to Duke. And I think they just sort of came back down to earth, and everyone was like, wait a minute, they don't really have anything resume-wise that jumps off the page. And it's a terrible break for Louisville because of how few games they were able to play this year because of some COVID issues. And so, 1 more game out of them, 1 more win out of them, and it might be a different story. And you might sort of flip-flop Louisville being in versus the first team out. And it's a brutal beat. But when you look at resumes side by side, I think Syracuse definitely edges them out. And I know there's naturally some uproar and some disagreement whenever Syracuse makes the field. But I do think that this is a team that is beyond deserving. And we sort of had that whirlwind of emotions. I felt Sunday morning, I woke up, no question about it. Syracuse is in, they've got a bye. Maybe they lose the bye and they're playing in one of those first 4 games, which is fine. Like, you just want to be in there. I think Boeheim sort of paraphrased it yesterday, or it was paraphrased in an interview. You've got to be in the tournament to win a tournament game. So they make the field, and boy, was it a sweat leading in. But now the sweat sort of shifts from the question marks in the air to what we have now seen sort of set in stone. And they're going up against a number 6 seed, San Diego State. Per the tournament rankings, they're number 24 in the field. But Jim Boeheim says yesterday that this is a team that could easily be a 3 seed. And when you look at a San Diego State and you look at a team like that, Boeheim says they really don't have any weaknesses. And he goes, you don't see teams that don't have weaknesses outside of the 1 and 2 line. And somehow Syracuse matches up with a 6 seed with very, very few weaknesses.
Yeah, it's an Aztecs team that have won 14 games in a row, regular season and conference champions in the Mountain West. It's a dangerous team. A lot of people forget because last year was canceled. San Diego State held the number 1 ranking in the country during the 2019-20 season at one point. It didn't end that way, but still. The no weaknesses, I mean, he's got a valid point. They shoot the 3 well. They get to the line a decent amount. They have good defense. They steal a lot. They have a high steal percentage, 7.2%. That's 22nd in the country. They don't give it up a ton. Pretty evenly distributed points between the 2-point line and the 3-point line. There's no 2-point line, but you know what I'm saying. It's I think, an all-around strong team. I'm interested to see what you guys think. The thing that I think is maybe, the Achilles heel is just who have you really done it against? And you look at this team, they've played, not great competition. A win against UCLA to start the year, that's a pretty solid victory. Lose to BYU by 10. Some okay wins in there, back-to-back wins over Boise State, like an okay team. Utah State, they did beat in the conference tournament final, but you lose to Utah State twice earlier in the year. So I think for San Diego State, the floor and ceiling are so far from each other because they could be this team who's just great. I mean, their defense has been crazy. The most points that the Aztecs have allowed this year is 72. And really, for the most part, they've kept teams in the high 50s, low 60s. But it's not great competition. So while the Orange have had some blunders, if the teams are a lot better, and we'll see what happens when the two go at it this Friday, it could be a San Diego State team that's a little bit blitzed by the up in competition.
Yeah, and they haven't lost since all the way back on January 16th. Now, obviously, yes, you can chalk that up to who have they played, similar to, almost the Gonzaga narrative that, and you mentioned pre-show, that the narrative that the Zags have taken on over the past couple of years of, yeah, you're winning games, but all right, what does that really mean? But still, I mean, you look at some of the box scores, and they have simply destroyed teams. I mean, you look at this stat sheet, and on paper, they're a heck of a lot better than a 6 seed. Another thing worth noting, too, I think they're thrilled that they're not getting a first 4 winner, because now what this allows you to do, if you're the Aztecs, is you can prepare really for the better part of a week for this unique Syracuse 2-3 zone, rather than finding out Wednesday or Thursday or whenever these first 4 games are who the opponent is. But I don't know. I mean, I think this is a team that is built to play with Syracuse. Obviously, for Syracuse, it starts with containing Matt Mitchell, their best player, who actually grew up a Syracuse fan and wore an orange headband when he played in rec league games and things of that nature, comparing himself to Carmelo Anthony. So definitely keep an eye on Mitchell, but it's not just him. They only have 2 players who score in double figures, but a lot of nice role players who, can step in and play meaningful minutes. And Syracuse is going to have their hands full, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, for Syracuse fans, San Diego State, this Aztec squad is by no means familiar. Right? You played them twice all time. The last time you play them was in the 2012-2013 season on an aircraft carrier, where San Diego State shot 1 for 18 from 3 and shot under 50% on 31 attempts from the foul line. The wind was berserk. It was a crazy game. They scored under 50 points as a team. You don't really know what you're going to get from San Diego State based on that narrative. That is the biggest of outliers you can ever find. And, since I believe it's 2010, Syracuse, San Diego State have been pretty dead even in terms of, their time in the AP or in the top 25. Whereas prior, that was unfamiliar territory to San Diego State and beyond familiar to the Orange, especially in years of late leading up to the new decade over in 2010. But this is a team right now that is playing good basketball. And I sort of, you look around the ACC for a team to compare them to, and it's almost like when you look at the KenPom rankings, and they're very similar to UNC. San Diego State is number 11 in defensive efficiency. UNC is 15, and then they sort of drop off in terms of the offensive efficiency. But I think it's sort of like the UVAs of years past, not as much this year, because UVA's offensive efficiency has actually been very impressive so far. But it's that they're phenomenal defensively, and they do enough offensively. They bring a lot to the table, but there's definitely that drop off on the offensive side. They're going to work you defensively. They rotate incredibly well in the limited film that I've been able to watch so quickly. And then on the other side, they do enough offensively. Jordan Shackle is going to be, one of the guys that you really look out for, because one of the big vulnerabilities of the 2-3, as we know so well, is it oftentimes can leave guys open for 3, and man shoots 47% from 3. He is one of the best in the country at 3-point shooting, and he does it not in sparse attempts, almost 170 3-point attempts. I was saying, if I could go to the YMCA and just shoot 170 times and make 80 like this guy does, I would be so pleased with my basketball game. And this guy does it in game with hands in his face, off of screens, however you need him to do it. He is the guy that I sort of circle. Matt Mitchell is going to be tough because of his versatility, but I think Jordan Shackle could actually, or Shackle, I'm going to go back and forth on how I say that. He can be someone that is, the guy that when Syracuse loses games to non-con opponents, it always seems like someone goes off for a career day. You got to circle him, number 20, and just sort of see, is this the guy? Because he is a guy that could tear Syracuse apart.
Yeah, he's a big candidate. Another guy, Terrell Gomez, shoots 42% from 3. But personally, I think the guy that Syracuse has to worry about the most is Nathan Mensah, the big man. He's from Ghana, 6'10", 230 pounds. Actually not the heaviest guy on the team, but he is the tallest. And he can move pretty well. He's He's no, like Jackson Hayes. I don't think he's like incredibly athletic at his size, but he definitely moves better than the Syracuse big men. No offense to them. And I think has slightly more coordination. The interesting thing is, can he break out? He's about an 8-6 player, 8.6 rebounds per game, but we constantly see guys have career days against the Orange when they're just standard traditional big men. I mean, Mark Williams, this whole season was turned around by that Syracuse game. He went nuts after he played Syracuse. So Mensah could be a problem. He scored in double digits a handful of times this year. I think the bright side for Syracuse, he's only rebounded in double digits twice. This isn't an exceptional rebounding team. They have a +4 margin, but it's only +1.5 on the offensive rebound side. And they have a pretty average offensive rebound percentage of 29.9, which is 109th in the country. So I think you have to limit Mensah and just hope that the 3-point shots are contained as well as they have been all year, because Syracuse's 3-point defense has picked up a lot. If another scorer comes into the fold for SDSU combined with the great defense, that's a big issue. But Johnny, I'm interested to hear who you think is the X factor. If I stole Gomez, that's my bad.
Well, I'm going to look at the X factor, Ben, from a Syracuse side of things. I mean, I know obviously we're doing a little in-depth San Diego State preview here, but you look at the Orange and it's got to start with Buddy Boeheim. Which Buddy Boeheim are we going to get? Are we getting the all ACC tournament Buddy Boeheim that gave you 27 and 31 in the two ACC tournament games? Because, the looming question over this Syracuse team all year is, yeah, you have a lot of good players. You have a guy in Quincy Guerrier who obviously is getting better with time and developing, and you know what Buddy Boeheim can give you. Alan Griffin, of course, has dropped off a little bit, but I think it's no secret that if this Syracuse team is going to find any postseason success, they really do need Buddy to be that alpha male, that top dog, that closer. And I don't think Syracuse wins this game if you don't get at least 22, 23, if not more, from Buddy. Now, from the San Diego State side of things, it's interesting because this is a team that as a program has not really had a whole ton of success in March. Obviously, at one point last year, they were the number one team in the country. So perhaps a chance to change that narrative, but it wasn't meant to be, of course, with no tournament last year. But, their deepest tournament runs were to the Sweet 16 in both 2011 and 2014. Their last tournament appearance, 2018, they were an 11 seed. They got bounced by Houston in the first round. Their last tournament win, you got to go all the way back to 2015 against St. John's in the first round. And then after that, they were bounced by top seeded Duke in the round of 32. So obviously lots of new faces. But if you want to play the experience card, yes, Syracuse, obviously the heavy underdog in 11 going up against a 6 that we've been talking about for a while now, should really probably even be a 4 or a 5, but sort of treading new waters for this Aztecs program, and look for Syracuse to exploit that come Friday night.
Yeah, the Orange, tournament experience, I think, is a big factor because the Orange are a good tournament team. And for people who don't watch a lot of their games, it's understandable to question what that means. But the 2-3 zone is what that means. Syracuse in 2017-18 really, in my opinion, had no business even being in the tournament and end up playing in all the way to the Sweet 16, knocking off Michigan State. So getting a team's second best offense at all times, as Jay Billis described it to us recently, and just being able to surprise teams with a zone that they may not have seen before in conference is huge. And before I let Owen hop in, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that 2011 San Diego State Elite 8 team that Johnny just talked about had former Toronto Raptors NBA champion Kawhi Leonard at the helm. So that's all I'm going to say.
Good for you, Ben. Get your Canadian shouts in here. Whenever you need them, you've got free range to just shout them out. But this is a San Diego State team that historically we talked about the tournament struggles. I forget the number and the overall record, but they have never upset a team in the tournament. They have always won, or not always won, but when they're the higher seed, they have won. But when they're the lower seed, they have lost every game in their tournament history. They've never had that upset victory. Maybe this is a year that they can make a run. I think West Virginia, theoretically coming out and being in that round of 32 game is a vulnerable team and a beatable team for someone like San Diego State. So maybe if they can put together a little run, this is the year that they can do it. But when you look at this game and when you look at the situation, San Diego State it's a tough opponent, as Boeheim said, and a really tough draw. You look at this team, the starting lineup has 4 seniors and a junior. That is, one of the, if not the most experienced starting 5 in college basketball. There's really, there are very few teams that do that. And it's tough to go up against that experience. It really is. But when you look at the Syracuse tournament success, I think we got to come back to it. This is a stat that I think I subliminally knew, but never really figured out until earlier today. I believe it was Stephen Fonte who tweeted it out. Just about Syracuse is 18-8 in the NCAA tournament since 2010. And so, you sort of understand that. You see that there have been 10 tournaments since then. Syracuse makes 8. They're in the NIT for 1. They got a postseason ban for another. But in their 8 tournaments, they've made the Sweet 16 or better 5 of their 8 times. Those numbers speak for themselves. You got 2 Final Fours, an Elite 8, 2 more Sweet 16s. They make runs. That's why the tournament committee puts them in sometimes, because you know what they can do. And it's that history. Everyone knows that Syracuse knows the bubble better than anyone. And that's exactly where they were once again this year. You go back, to 2016 even. You think there are many people critiquing whether or not Syracuse should be in there. We all know what happens there. You get the big upset over Virginia. They're a Final Four team. In 2017, the narrative was they were in, and people thought they were in. And next thing you know, they're in the NIT. 2018, they're the last team in. They go to the Sweet 16. 2019, they're comfortably in, and they lose to Baylor. This year, you think they're a last 4, and out of the blue, they pick up a bye. No one can predict where Syracuse falls, but what you can predict is that whoever they play, they can for sure give a run for their money. We're coming up here on just about 20, 30 minutes right now. So we'll look into sort of where is not necessarily your key, but if Syracuse wins this game, what do they do? And if Syracuse loses this game, what do they do? Ben, rip it first, and then we'll just take it around the circle here.
Yeah, so both the win and lose, I think, fall for me on the line of rebounding. Syracuse, even though they're not an outstanding rebounding team, the Orange have won, I believe, every single game that they have out-rebounded their opponent and have a brutal losing record when they get out-rebounded. I don't even think SU needs to out-rebound SDSU. I just think the Orange need to stay in the sphere of the Aztecs. So limiting the big guys, keeping control of the glass, not allowing too many second chance opportunities, because Virginia, even though the Orange were in a place to win that game, really allowed the Cavaliers to keep a lot of possessions alive. I think with the way Syracuse played defense down the stretch, with the way Buddy shot down the stretch, I'm not worried about those 2 facets. It's just rebounding for me. If that's under control, SU wins. If it's out of control, SDSU wins.
Ben, I like that you have a vote of confidence there for the SU defense. I'm not feeling as optimistic, though. For me, I think Syracuse wins this game if they close out on shooters and defend the 3-point line. Look, San Diego State's got 3 key rotational guys that are over 40% from downtown. That's lethal. That's as scary as it gets from a defensive standpoint. And Owen, you mentioned, of course, if there's a way to beat the 2-3, it's to fire away from downtown early and often. Expect this San Diego State team to do that, and look for the Syracuse perimeter defense to come up with a big answer. I think if the Orange can find a way to defend the 3-point line, that's how they escape this round of 64.
I'm going to go not similar to Ben in terms of my thing here, but in terms of it's the reason they win or the reason they lose. I think they need to attack via multiple scores. You've seen what happens when Buddy goes off. It's incredible, but in order for this Syracuse team to really thrive, you need multiple guys to be stepping up, and that's sort of where things fell apart for them when they were doing so well in the first half. Obviously, Buddy was playing well, but the scoring was much more balanced. In the second half, outside of Buddy and Quincy, and Quincy really didn't even score that much in the second half, but outside of those two, in the 60% of minutes outside of those two who played the entire second half, Syracuse scored 5 points. You've got to be able to diversify your scoring. You need somebody to run along. I think Alan Griffin's sort of the name you circle. You've seen a tough stretch out of him, but I think this extra week to sort of get mentally prepped and be ready for this big stage is going to play massive dividends for him. I think he is sort of this key for Syracuse to be able to run alongside Buddy. And if it's not him, then you got to look to Quincy. You need 2, maybe even 3 guys to be viable scoring options, 2 or 3 guys on your game, because this is a tough Aztec defense. Number 11 in KenPom's defensive efficiency. I think we know that they're a very, very difficult team to get inside on, which is why I think you're going to be able to have to move the ball and have to get many people involved, because if you've got so many threats, it's going to allow you to be significantly more effective. And I think that really is the key for Syracuse in this one. We'll fire off a round of predictions on here. We don't need to go into score for this. We'll just say, do they pull it off? Do they not? And then we'll probably put something. Maybe we'll do, who knows? We'll workshop this once we get off the air. We might do a little bracket between the 3 of us and see who reigns supreme. See if Ben can get his ACC revenge on me after that absolute abomination. Ben, does Syracuse get the job done?
Yeah, I had a brutal ACC picks here that just kind of ended in a forfeit, but because I just didn't want to do it anymore. But I'm going to pick San Diego State, and maybe that's good news for Syracuse fans because I've been pretty bad at picking this year. But Syracuse has played well. I think San Diego State just does too much that Syracuse doesn't want to see. They have a guy who's got decent weight that can pass out of the post. They can shoot the 3. They rebound okay. So I think that's too much. It's probably a close game, but I'm not sure that the Orange keep the season going.
I'm going to go a little more glass half full. I filled out my bracket. I have the Orange winning this game. I think they just find a way to get it done. Obviously coming off of a loss, which doesn't bode well, but I think this is a team that is really found their stride as of late. And dare I say, even perhaps playing some of the best ball they've played all year. I think they're starting to find their groove, and obviously it starts with Buddy. But the question becomes who else steps up, as you mentioned, Owen. And if someone else does, I think they're going to catch this San Diego State team off guard. Obviously, we mentioned the experience factoring in. We know they're well coached, obviously, with Mr. Boeheim himself. But I don't know. I got a funny feeling. We all know that when Syracuse is on the bubble and they find a way to sneak in, it's only a matter of time until they make some noise. And I think, good news for Orange fans. I think that starts Friday night.
I think they either lose the first round or make the Sweet 16, and I don't think there's an in-between here. I'm going to side with Johnny here. I think they really can pull this off. I'm going to pull my default. This is why I usually pick against Gonzaga, although I can't advise it this year. That Gonzaga team is absolutely unbelievable. And I don't know if I can pick them to not win, but at the same time, I think I might have to in order to diversify a little bit. But I don't think San Diego State has really played anyone this entire season that, presents too much of a challenge. And then, Utah State is the big team. And I think Syracuse can really keep them on their toes. Obviously a down year for the ACC, but the competition was still there because there were so many teams right in the middle of the pack there that you were playing tough, competitive games, game in and game out. And I think that if Syracuse can come out decent and not get off to a slow start, I think this is a team that can really, make a little bit of a run and upset an Aztec team that has not had the greatest of tournament success historically. So I think I'll roll with that one. Johnny and I saying Syracuse advances. Ben keeping us on our toes. I think he might be the realist among the 3 of us right now. But that is where we'll leave you for this episode. We will probably jump in regardless. If Syracuse wins, if Syracuse loses, we'll catch up with you this weekend. Ben's got Boeheim cutting down the net. So if you are watching us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, like the video, leave us a comment because we love that feedback. We love interacting with you guys. Find us on Twitter at Ostrom Avenue Pod. Like the stuff, follow, do everything. Tweet questions at us. we botched. We threw out a question today asking about how far Syracuse goes, and no one replied. You could have gotten a wonderful Twitter shout out, but do not worry. There will be more opportunities for that at Ostrom Avenue Pod. And then wherever you're listening to us, wherever you're listening to this podcast, please subscribe, please leave a review, please leave a rating. They all go a very, very long way. So whether you're watching or listening to us right now, for Ben Shulman, for the brand new welcome aboard Johnny Gadamowitz, I'm Owen Valentine. This has been the Ostrom Avenue Podcast. We'll catch you next week, or this weekend, actually. Stay safe. Go Orange.